Welcome back to Dagryffyn Hobby. My name's Dave. In this video, we're going to take a closer look at the methods I use to create my scenery. So how do I create things like this mountain? It's not too complicated of a process. I started out a while back watching some videos of people carving foam, get some ideas on how to start. And since then, I've just continued practicing, and each part of the layout kind of becomes its own little experiment to see how things work out. And there are parts I like and parts I don't like. Things that are too defined, things that are not defined enough. I'm just gonna keep going, and when I get back to a spot that I feel isn't good enough, maybe I'll carve it a little bit more, do a little more detail, or in an extreme case, cut it out and start over. I start with an idea of what I want the shape, the mountain, the platform, whatever it is to look like. And I'll just randomly either stack up scraps of foam or pieces that are cut to the largest proportion that that piece might require. Something like the mountain behind me, filled all the space that wasn't track with equally cut sheets of foam so that I could shape it any way I wanted. Once I had that stacked up to an overall shape that I liked, I start cutting. The first thing I would do is do some basic shaping with a hot wire foam cutter. Now this is just a cheap one off Amazon. It takes a little bit of practice to get used to. It's a little hard to cut straight, and I'm sure there are people out there a lot better at it than I am. But if you use some metal straight edges, that can help you run it along. But anytime you turn, twist, or alter the angle, it's going to affect the cut. But that's why it's a first cut. I'll do the general shape with this, cut off the edges, the corners, and to get an idea of the overall shape. Most of the other work is done with a basic serrated kitchen knife. This one has some bend to it, and I have found that that works well. I did exceed the pressure limit on one of these. This is my second one. I snapped the first one right about here. Blade just snapped right in half. Probably too much pressure that direction, but whoops. These things happen. Most of the shaping with this, either cutting with the blade, sawing with the blade, kind of scraping, and that's why I use a serrated knife, is because that will add texture as I scrape. Digging, cutting, scraping, poking, slicing, just all different techniques with this one knife. Now, I'll also use a utility knife. This is usually used for cutting long, straight cuts in the foam. You score it, and then you can snap the foam to get overall size pieces you need. Other things I will do is if I want to create something like this cut down the rock, I might carve it with this first, and then take something like this putty knife and push it into the cut and twist and pop the pieces out, and that will give me a very irregular, almost rock-like look. And then I just keep going at it until either I'm too tired to continue or I've achieved the look that I'm going for at the time. I'll also use this brush. It's, I guess, a nylon stripping brush is what they call it. It's stiff, but still flexible. And then I'll use a wire brush, and this is a lot more stiff and a lot more harsh. So that's really about all I use to do the landscaping. The hot wire foam cutter, the kitchen knife, the putty knife, the two brushes, and a utility knife. Every so often I might use a different tool just because I'm trying to achieve something I'm not able to do with one of those. Most extreme thing that I did, and dangerous, was I used a machete to slice down the middle of a long piece of foam to break it into two pieces. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing that. I'm lucky I kept all my fingers with that one. Really, the process is just finding something that works to get a result that's close to what you're looking for. One last item that's very important, especially when cutting the foam, some sort of face mask, because cutting the foam creates a lot of dust. Sure, most of it settles and drops and comes off in bigger pieces, but I did notice early on that if I started cutting the foam and I wasn't wearing some sort of face covering, it would definitely irritate my throat, and that's not good. Do yourself a favor, wear a mask. Here I have a larger piece. This was painted brown because I was using it somewhere in the layout, but it's not used there anymore. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a little basic work. A couple other tools that I didn't mention. a utility knife with the extending blade. This one's very short because when I use this in an improper manner and I snap the blade. The blade ends up being about this long when it's new and enables you to cut really deep through the foam, which helps, but if you turn the knife at all, it snaps the blade. So it really didn't do what I wanted it to do, but I still use it every once in a while when it's within reach. And also, like I had said, a straight edge, a level, doesn't really matter. Something that's not going to be cut with your knife. I'm gonna pick just a spot on this foam and score it. Now you can see it didn't stick to the straight edge because of the way I was doing it. So you have to kind of go at an angle and press against the straight edge. And that will give you a much straighter line. But once you have that, you can slide your knife through that same cut or close to it and do it a few times. Now, if this was 1-inch foam, that would have been plenty after one cut or something, but I did a couple of cuts. You can see it's not particularly straight, didn't go all the way through. It should be enough to break it. So I just flipped it upside down, applied pressure, and it snaps. And it snaps pretty clean. Generally, the next step would be using a hot wire foam cutter to get a basic shape. And I'll usually do a couple cuts. This gives me a nice rock shape to work with. But what about the flat surface? Well, now that it's been painted, it makes it a little bit more difficult. You can still go across it with the foam cutter. You can do random individual cuts across the surface. To give you some initial texture. Or you can do a longer cut. Really depends what works. And I think the most important thing would be to switch it up, because you don't want to be too uniform in any of your shaping, because it's not going to look real. Now I realize I'm not necessarily going for 100% real here, but I want it to look good enough and close enough. That's the essential prep. That's easy and it's quick and it gets the basic shape down. Now, since I'm going to be cutting, I'm putting on the mask because I really don't need to breathe this stuff in. Now it's a matter of coming at it with the knife. And a lot of the texture is made just by dragging the knife across it. So that gives us some texture and some interest, some depth. And you want to pay attention also to lines like this. We definitely don't want to keep that line sharp like that. One of the things about the random cuts across the surface is that we'll create high and low points as you go. If a piece breaks off somewhere I wasn't expecting it to, I just work that into the design. If I'm trying to texture a large section, I may use the putty knife. sometimes that's just a little bit quicker. One more very important tool if you're going to be cutting foam like this, and that's a shop vac, because this stuff gets staticky, it sticks and clings, and you need to be able to just clean it all up quickly. There are some high spots and some low spots, some lines, but it doesn't quite look the way I would want it to. So I'm just going to follow the contours that have already shown up in this piece to make something more rock-like. And I'm not going for rock mold type detail. I'm going for the overall feel of rock. So I'm not too concerned about, well, any of it really. I'm just gonna work with it and see what happens. As you can see, it really tears the foam away a lot more than this brush. So now I might look at this in different light just to see where the shadows are, where they fall, what it looks like from different angles. Now I see that I have kind of a flat spot right here and over here, and some at the bottom. But I've also got some interesting depth and shapes going on here, where I just alternate angles cutting with the blade. Now I take the knife, the putty knife again, press it in there and pop, twist, or whatever I need to do to pop some of the pieces out. And that, what comes out is going to depend on not only the depth of your original cut, but how far you stick the putty knife in and how you drag it through there. And now I might cut down into it instead of just straight. When I cut in these situations, I try to do it on an angle so that I'm not cutting straight down into the foam, but kind of creating depth by going behind one side of it. So realistic or not, that adds more depth than I had here. So instead of popping the pieces out, you can also get in there with your knife and just start kind of cutting along that fault line that you made. So we have two different methods kind of doing a very similar thing. And that's really what I think is important, is variation. You don't want to do everything the same way because it will end up looking too uniform. I kind of just want the shape to emerge on its own. It's kind of like that, idea that the shape is already there, I'm just revealing it. So I'm just gonna kind of follow the contours of what happens. The nice thing about this piece is that it's 2 inches deep. It gives you a lot more ability to create depth than if you were doing it with a 1 inch thick piece. Now, a lot of people will ask me what I'm styling my mountains and my rock work after, and really, honestly, I'm not styling it after anything that I'm aware of. I'm just kind of going with what happens when I carve it, and if I like it when I'm done, that's it. I'm not going for any particular look. I'm just playing, cutting, having a good time, and seeing what reveals itself. And some stuff will look better and some will look worse, but that's just how it goes. Besides, I don't know how much of all of this along the layout will eventually be covered by trees and grass and rocks anyway. I feel like it needs a little something here, and then maybe it's done. It really doesn't matter if you get all the little pieces out from spots like this, because there might be little rocks shoved in there. And when I'm painting this and detailing it, I might be shoving little rocks in there to create some more depth. A section like this here, I might think, okay, well this would be like grass growing down the top edge of the cliff as it rounds off, and then rock down here. But that kind of makes me want to do a cut here. So I could sit here for the next hour and continue carving on this in little bits, making little crevices and cracks and rocks and whatever else. But for the moment, this would be good enough to fill the spot until later when I have a better idea of what I want it to look like. Those are the tools, and this is the result. I hope you found this informative, interesting, or at least amusing. I do apologize for any banging in the background. My neighbors are having their siding done, and it is too nice of a day to keep the windows closed. So I hope that didn't distract too much from the amazing artistic work that is this piece of foam. I hope this helps you in your efforts to detail your layout. If you have any questions, let me know. Be happy to impart any wisdom that I have attained during this process on this layout. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time on Dagryffyn Hobby.